GOP lawmakers delivered for Trump but not themselves, by Chris Steyerwalt. Congress returned from its Thanksgiving break to a markedly different world from the one of even just a few weeks ago, when lawmakers passed the current stopgap spending bill that runs until January 21st. It has been a series of ugly news cycles for the majority party since Republicans' success in getting the government reopened without any substantive concessions to the Democratic minority. The House and Senate held the line on Obamacare at considerable political cost to vulnerable members, yet still came limping into a fraught and busy December. And it is because of unrelated stories, almost none of which were the fault of the congressional GOP. It has been a daily drumbeat of bad news about the Trump administration. Epstein revelations, another round of dubious pardons, the murder of a 20-year-old National Guard member patrolling near the White House, consumer confidence on the skids, the White House's gerrymandering gambit falling on hard times, the Russian oligarchy's path to profit in the Ukraine peace talks, and reports that the Pentagon ordered the killing of suspected drug traffickers who had survived an initial airstrike. A story that has now turned into a legal and ethical morass from which Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth is struggling and so far failing to extricate himself. Again, none of this is Congress's fault, at least strictly speaking. One could argue that all of it is the fault of a legislative branch that, for the sake of political expedience and incumbency protection, has ceded so much of its authority. But under the rules of the game, as it has been understood in Washington since at least the 1990s, lawmakers only stand up to presidents of the opposing party. Congress is not directly responsible for much of the mess in which it now finds itself. Indeed, the wafer-thin Republican majority in the House, and the only slightly more comfortable one in the Senate have done what, a year ago at this time, would have seemed remarkably successful. Even former Speaker Nancy Pelosi, Democrat from California, would have to admire the level of unity and discipline involved in passing a massive budget package, including politically punishing cuts to Medicaid, in one big, beautiful bill, and then holding serve against Democrats when they jammed those cuts right back in the GOP's face in the shutdown. A year ago, it was unclear how House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican from Louisiana, would even survive the cannibalistic tendencies of his conference. He got the job, after all, by being the least unappealing alternative after his predecessor was eaten alive after just 9 months with the gavel. Imagine any of Johnson's recent Republican predecessors taking the House out of session for 54 days during a shutdown and making it stick. They would have boiled Johnson's predecessor Kevin McCarthy in oil, and yet Johnson breezed through. Nor would it have been a certainty that John Thune, Republican from South Dakota, could actually win the Senate Majority Leader job after his mentor, Senator Mitch McConnell, Republican from Kentucky, stepped down. The bet that Thune could do so, and then lead his own conference through the double switchback of an unpopular reconciliation package and the retaliatory shutdown, the longest in history, would have brought substantial returns for any gambler. The poo-poohers and naysayers of the pundit class owe Thune and Johnson some respect. But of course, it would not have been possible but for the same man who is currently generating all of this bad news for Republicans. That is the predicament for the congressional GOP in Trump 2.0. It has never been easier to maintain discipline in a party that for decades has been famous for its infighting. But that solidarity has not paid many dividends for the lawmakers themselves. As the president's overall popularity has continued to slide, now at 36% in the Gallup poll, lower than at any point in either term except for the aftermath of January 6, 2021, when he hit 34%, Republican voters' approval of Congress has fallen off a cliff. In March, 53% of Republican voters approved of the job Congress was doing. Now it is 23%. Those same voters have been riding steadily with President Trump for the most part. The president is down to 84% GOP approval from his peak of 93% in February. But the 9-point loss after a year of economic woes and successive scandals speaks to just how deeply attached the rank and file of the Republican Party remains to him. Trump has lost less than 10 points with the home team, while congressional Republicans have lost 30. And for what exactly? Aside from refusing to nuke the legislative filibuster, the 119th Congress has acceded to almost every demand. You would have to go back to the administrations of Lyndon Johnson in 1965 or Franklin Roosevelt in 1933 to find this degree of White House control over Congress. Not only did those presidents do it with the help of a massive electoral mandate and huge partisan majorities in both chambers, both of which Trump and the Republican lack, they were working on big, transformative legislative projects. Civil rights or the New Deal offered an ideological carrot, in addition to the stick wielded by a newly elected president with tight control of his party. With Trump, there has been a lot more fear about what he can do in primary elections than any kind of policy or ideological project. Indeed, much of what Trump has asked congressional Republicans to do is sit on their hands. On oversight on tariffs, on Russia sanctions, on war powers, on Epstein, on immigration, etc. Republicans have obliged to a remarkable degree. And yet, the same voters who Republicans are afraid Trump could turn against them are deeply unhappy with Congress. With 7 weeks to come up with a deal to avoid another shutdown, congressional Republicans return to work with not much to show for all their successes of 2025. Unloved by the voters of their own party, and staring into the possibility of a midterm shellacking. No wonder so many of them are retiring.